Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This will be the last session before we enter Christmas. And Mr. Speaker, I noted from a couple of articles that have been in the news this week. This one from December 17th. A story from Minnesota. The title, Parents Question Choice to Sing Allahu Akbar at a Holiday Concert. It is intriguing that in an age when groups are attacking our Judeo-Christian heritage, trying to rewrite our history, trying to prevent any mention of our Christian heritage. I'm looking at the full face of Moses directly above me, in front of me, because we have in this chamber profiles of people who were considered to be the greatest lawgivers of all time. And until recent years, Moses was considered the greatest lawgiver of all time. The founders believed that. The Supreme Court now has relegated Moses to the ash heap of history. His revelation that he said came from God, that a man shall leave his father and mother, and woman leave her home. The two shall become one flesh. Jesus doubled down on that. Said not only is that what marriage is, but what God joined together, let nobody pull apart. So we relegated Moses to the ash heap. We've had the Supreme Court for years now saying, first, you can't have prayer in public, even though the founders started each day of the Continental Congress with prayer. And although the Constitutional Convention didn't start each day with prayer, when they hit a break, it could go no farther. Benjamin Franklin made his powerful speech about how they had begun each day with prayer. As he said, his exact words, in the beginning contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground, he went on to say, if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it possible an empire could rise without his aid? We've been assured, sir, in the sacred writing that unless the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. He said he firmly believed this. He said, I also firmly believe that without his, God's, concurring aid, we will succeed in our political building no better than the builders of Babel. We'll be confounded by our local partial interests, and we ourselves shall be bywords through time. So I know our heritage. They didn't have money to pay for a chaplain that they could all agree on to do the prayer every day. It's pointed out in the debate that we agreed on a chaplain. We didn't agree on any specific person here to do the prayer for all the different denominations. But we don't have a treasury. We don't have money. We can't have a chaplain. And that's when Randolph made his motion. Okay, basically they'd hit a brick wall. They were making no progress. As Franklin had said, we have more no's than ayes on virtually every vote. So he moved that they recess. Here was the end of June. They recess and reconvene to celebrate the country's birthday in early July and worship together. So they did. That one passed. They reconvened to worship God at the Reformed Calvinistic Church there in Philadelphia. You can go online to Speaker and find what's reported to be the prayer that he gave. It had a powerful influence. And when they reconvened, there was a new spirit. They were able to come together and end up arriving at the great compromise. Founder after founder, including Washington himself, pointed out that clearly God's hand was upon them in the preparation of the Constitution, and then ultimately resulting in the Bill of Rights. And the first right within the Bill of Rights was basically to make clear that government would never interfere with religion. And basically, we have come to a place after all these years where the United States Supreme Court has said, not only can you not have the Judeo-Christian God as part of any government, the same God that the founders were giving credit to and praying to, but now this year the Supreme Court took the ultimate step of saying, forget Moses, forget Jesus, we're the new God, and here's what we pronounce in place of Moses and Jesus and our founding principles. So this is a big year. And I know the president says we're not a Christian nation, and I won't argue that point with him. I won't debate him. I think he's right. Where we started, and I know every time, according to my staff, I mention God here, where in this capital, God's name has been invoked from the very beginning of this capital and before this capital, and when it was in Philadelphia, and when the first Congress was sworn in and President George Washington was sworn in at Federal Hall in New York City. His idea to bring his Bible and put his hand on the Bible, his idea to add the words, "So help me God." And it was all of their idea that the first thing they would do as a Congress together after being sworn in was to walk down basically Wall Street to St. Paul's Chapel there in New York and dedicate this country there in 1789 to God Almighty. So I won't debate the president saying we're not a Christian nation, but the Bible has been quoted over our history in this chamber more than any other book as a reason for or against legislation passing. It's part of our heritage. Much lesser extent in more recent years, as the Supreme Court, at least the 5 majority in the Supreme Court, becoming our God instead of the God that was acknowledged by Ben Franklin, George Washington, basically every president. And, Mr. Speaker, we have a job to represent our constituents. We have an oath to the Constitution, and I know we take that seriously. Our job in representing our constituents is to educate people on the issues and what has been important and what has been our strength, what has been our weaknesses. If you don't know our history, then, as the saying goes, those who refuse to learn from history are destined to repeat it. It's important to know history. It's important to note official words of United States highest magistrate, our president. Jefferson was asked once as he rode his horse down Pennsylvania Avenue on a Sunday morning. He had a big Bible in his hand, it was reported. And I've had this verified by Congressional Research Service that when Jefferson was president for those 8 years, when he was in Washington, Not only did he condone the church service, the largest Christian church service in Washington that occurred just down the hall, but he participated. He would come. He would even have the Marine Band come and play the hymns on many occasions for the Christian church service. But as he rode down on this one occasion, he was asked, "Mr. President, where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to church up in the Capitol." And a statement was made, "Mr. President, you don't believe everything they do," because he had questions about some of the miracles reported in the Bible. But it was reported that his response was, "Sir, I am the highest elected magistrate in this country. Imperative that I set the proper example." Now, I asked CRS, is it true that people, what's been attributed to people claim to be the father of the Constitution, James Madison, that when he was president for his 8 years, that he also condoned and participated in church services just down the hall here every Sunday he was in Washington. And Congressional Research Service, bipartisan, nonpartisan service, reported, yes, but he was different from Jefferson. Jefferson normally rode a horse down Pennsylvania Avenue, whereas Madison would normally come to church up here in the Capitol in a coach drawn by horses rather than on horseback. So for those, Mr. Speaker, as we take the Christmas recess, the traditional Christmas recess, no matter what your religious preference is or no preference at all, it's a fact this is a Christmas recess. And although this was not a statement at Christmas time, the commander of our military in 1778, George Washington, made this order as commander of our military. Some say this is really the reason God blessed their efforts, was because of their commitment and dedication. But this is an order of George Washington to the troops at Valley Forge. This is George Washington's order, Mr. Speaker. I will read it verbatim. The Commander-in-Chief directs that divine service be performed every Sunday at 11 o'clock in each brigade which has a chaplain. Those brigades which have none will attend the places of worship nearest to them. It is expected that officers of all ranks will, by their attendance, set an example for their men. While we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we certainly ought not to be inattentive to the higher duties of religion. To the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to laud the more distinguished character of Christian. Those are George Washington's words as commander of our military. Well, John Adams, without whom it's unlikely we would have arrived at the place we did with the Declaration. He's the one that directed Thomas Jefferson to do the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. He was critical in holding things together, even though he only won one term as president. He was vice president for 2 terms. Very important in arriving at our Constitution. But Adams, October 11th, 1798, said this to the 1st Brigade, 3rd Division of Militia of Massachusetts. We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest. 7 years after the last statement I read from Harry Truman, this was his official pronouncement. President Eisenhower said, "This evening's ceremony here at the White House is one of the many thousands in American traditional celebration of the birth, almost 2,000 years ago, of the Prince of Peace. For us, this Christmas is truly a sense of goodwill, and our first peaceful one since 1949. Our hopes are even brighter, though the world still stands divided in two antagonistic parts. More precisely than in any other way, prayer places freedom and communism in opposition, one to the other. The communist can find no reserve of strength in prayer because his doctrine of materialism and statism denies the dignity of man and consequently the existence of God. But in America, George Washington long ago rejected exclusive dependence upon mere values. In the bitter and critical winter at Valley Forge, when the cause of liberty was so near defeat, his recourse was sincere and earnest prayer. From it, he received new hope, new strength of purpose, out of which grew the freedom in which we celebrate this Christmas season. As a religious faith is the foundation of free government, so is prayer an indispensable part of that faith. Would it not be fitting for each of us to speak in prayer to the Father, and he capitalized Father, of all men and women on this earth, of whatever nation, of every race and creed, to ask that he, God, help us and teach us and strengthen us and receive our thanks? Should we not pray that he help us? He always capitalized he when he spoke of God. Should we not pray that he receive our thanks? For certainly we are grateful for the opportunity given us to use our strength and our faith to meet the problems of this hour. And on this Christmas Eve, all hearts in America are filled with special thanks to God that the blood of those we love no longer spills on battlefields abroad. May he, God, receive the thanks of each of us for this, his greatest bounty, and our supplication that peace on earth may live with us and always. So, the leader of our fight against fascism, world domination of hate in World War II, Dwight Eisenhower made those rather profound words. So, Mr. Speaker, we see through our history when our nation was deeply troubled, whether it was Washington, whether it was Lincoln, whether it was Franklin Roosevelt in World War II, Eisenhower, the Korean War, Kennedy during Vietnam, all of our presidents have known up to this point that our greatest hope comes through prayer to God. I'm not speaking these words and reading our historic statements by presidents, by our leaders, to try to convert anybody, but just so, Mr. Speaker, our history is understood. As our way continues to grow darker, criminal violence is escalating again, racial divides growing deeper when I thought we'd come so far. We need to turn, according to our former leaders, historically, what they said is turn to God. So this is not to convert anybody. It's simply so that this record of where presidents, leaders, Americans used to turn be part of the record today. So John Kennedy's words as president, December 17, 1962, This time there were only advisors in Vietnam. But the official lighting of the national Christmas tree was still Christmas tree for John Kennedy. With the lighting of this tree, which is an old ceremony in Washington and one which has been among the most important responsibilities of a good many presidents of the United States, we initiate in a formal way the Christmas season. We mark the festival of Christmas, which is the most sacred and hopeful day in our civilization. For nearly 2,000 years, the message of Christmas, the message of peace and goodwill toward men, has been the guiding star of our endeavors. I had a meeting which included some of our representatives from far-off countries in Africa and Asia. They were returning to their posts for the Christmas holidays. Talking with them, I was struck by the fact that in the far-off continents, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, as well as Christians pause from their labors on the 25th day of December to celebrate the birthday of the Prince of Peace. There could be no more striking proof that Christmas is truly the universal holiday of men. It is the day when all of us dedicate our thoughts to others, when all are reminded that mercy and compassion are the enduring virtues, when all show by small deeds and large and by acts that it is more blessed to give than to receive. It is the day when we remind ourselves that man can and must live in peace with his neighbors, and that it is the peacemakers who are truly blessed. In this year of 1962, we greet each other at Christmas with some special sense of the blessings of peace. This has been a year of peril, when the peace has been sorely threatened. But it has been a year when peril was faced and when reason ruled. As a result, we may talk at this Christmas just a little bit more confidently of peace on earth and goodwill to men. As a result, the hopes of the American people are perhaps a little higher. We have much yet to do. We still need to ask that God bless everyone. And of course, each president has made pronouncements of similar nature various times. But this was Jimmy Carter, President Carter, December 15th, 1977, at what he described as the Christmas pageant of peace ceremonies on the White House ellipse. Rather than read the entire thing, would you just say, this is from Jimmy Carter, President of the United States. Let me say that Christmas has a special meaning for those of us who are Christians, those of us who believe in Christ, those of us who know that almost 2,000 years ago, the Son of Peace was born to give us a vision of perfection, a vision of humility, a vision of unselfishness, a vision of compassion, a vision of love. The next year, he went on to say,
will the gentleman suspend for a moment?
I will.
We'll receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed S-227, cited as the Strengthening Education Through Research Act, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
The gentleman from Texas may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Carter, 1978, said, Rosalind and I send our warmest wishes to our fellow citizens who celebrate the birth of Christ and who rejoice with us in the coming of the peace he symbolizes. We welcome this opportunity to offer our thanks to those who have given us their encouragement and prayers. We also join in this season's traditional expression of appreciation to God for his blessings in the past year. and we ask for his continuing guidance and protection as we face the challenges of 1979. No President George W. Bush, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, and President Obama have delivered Christmas messages, and President Obama his holiday messages. Would like to conclude this time with Ronald Reagan, President Reagan's message, as he says, on the observance of Christmas. December 19th, 1988, his last Christmas message as president. President Reagan said this: themes of Christmas and of coming home for the holidays have long been intertwined in song and story. There is a profound irony and lesson in this, because Christmas celebrates the coming of a Savior who was born without a home. There was no room at the inn for the Holy Family. Weary of travel, a young Mary close to childbirth, and her carpenter husband, Joseph, found but the rude shelter of a stable. There was born the King of Kings, the Prince of Peace, an event on which all history would turn. Jesus would again be without a home, and more than once on the flight to Egypt and during his public ministry, when he said, "The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head." From his very infancy on, our Redeemer was reminding us that from then on we would never lack a home in him. Like the shepherds to whom the angel of the Lord appeared on the first Christmas day, we could always say, "Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us." As we come home with gladness to family and friends this Christmas, let us also remember our neighbors who cannot go home themselves. Our compassion and concern this Christmas and all year long will mean much to the hospitalized, the homeless, the convalescent, the orphaned, and will surely lead us on our way to the joy and peace of Bethlehem and the Christ child who bids us come. For it is only in finding and living the eternal meaning of the Nativity that we can be truly happy, truly at peace, truly home. He concludes, as I will, President Reagan, Merry Christmas, and God bless you.